They say every flower has a meaning. Lilies for innocence, roses for love, chrysanthemums for death. I used to think that was just poetic nonsense, but in the 3 months I worked at the Heavenly Petals flower shop, I learned that some flowers tell stories, and some stories are fertilized with secrets and watered with blood.
The town of Havenwood, Oregon, greeted the world with a sigh of damp air and the persistent scent of rain-soaked pine. It was one of those places that seemed to have sprung up from the fertile soil itself, a small hub of commerce carved out of the wilderness. For as long as anyone could remember, this valley had been known for its flower farms, vast fields of color that exploded into life each spring, defying the often gray skies. Tulips, roses, lilies, their beauty was the town's primary export, feeding a network of floral shops and delivery services that were the lifeblood of the local economy.
Among these, Heavenly Petals Flora was a notable, if quiet, presence. It was a smaller branch, an offshoot of a larger business from a nearby city, run by a man named Mr. Roberts. He was in his 50s, but carried himself with the vigor of a much younger man, a result of a disciplined, athletic lifestyle. From the outside, he was a picture of small-town success, yet a shadow of loneliness clung to him. His wife had left him years ago, a swift and decisive separation that he'd fought against to no avail.
Since the divorce, he had lived alone, pouring all his energy into the shop. But there was an oddity, a pattern that the town gossips hadn't failed to notice. Mr. Roberts only hired women. From the cashiers to the delivery drivers, even the person who swept the floors at night, all were female. And stranger still, none of them ever stayed long. They would work for a few weeks, a month at most, before quietly resigning, vanishing from the shop's roster as quickly as they had appeared. The reasons were never spoken aloud, a quiet mystery that only Mr. Roberts seemed to understand. This silent rotating door of employees continued unabated until a chilly Saturday morning in November. The air had a sharp bite to it, and the few pedestrians on the street were bundled in coats and thick woolen sweaters, their breath pluming in the cold. Weaving through the sparse crowd was a young woman named Quinn. Barely 20, she was a world away from her rural home in the sun-scorched plains of the South. The constant dampness of Oregon felt alien, a chilling contrast to the familiar, humid warmth she'd grown up with. A crushing weight of medical bills from her father's illness had pushed her family to the brink. With a heavy heart and a desperate hope, she had convinced her parents to let her seek her fortune elsewhere, anywhere that offered a paying job and a chance to send money back home. Her mother, her face a mask of quiet grief, had pressed a pair of small, silver earrings into her hand just before she'd boarded the Greyhound bus. "These were your grandmother's," she'd whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "If things get really, really bad, you know what to do. But please, Quinn, call us. Don't just disappear into your pride. Eat properly. Don't try to save every penny. We'll manage here." Her voice broke on the last word. Quinn had thrown her arms around her, the two of them clinging to each other in a silent, tearful embrace. A few moments later, her mother gently pushed her away. "Go on now. You'll miss your bus." Quinn had nodded, shouldered her worn backpack, and walked away without looking back. A storm of conflicting emotions, grief, fear, and a burning determination churning within her.
She had no way of knowing that her first steps into this new life would lead her down a path of unspeakable, horrifying trouble. After arriving in Havenwood, her first task was finding a place to stay. A grizzled taxi driver, sensing her desperation, pointed her toward a cheap boarding house tucked away down a narrow, poorly lit alley. The landlady, a woman whose face was a roadmap of weary decades, showed her to a small room for a few $100s a month. It was tiny, the air thick with the smell of dust and old wood, but it was clean and, most importantly, private. Quinn agreed immediately. After signing the lease, the landlady handed her a single, tarnished brass key. Across the hall, 3 other doors remained shut, a silent testament to tenants who were likely already out for the day. Alone at last, Quinn locked her door and collapsed onto the thin mattress. The long bus ride had left every muscle in her body screaming in protest. She lay there, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of anxieties about the future. What am I doing here? She thought, the unfamiliar scent of mildew filling her nostrils. This is all wrong. I should be home. But the image of her father's tired face and the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen table solidified her resolve. A grim smile touched her lips. She tapped her own forehead. "Get a grip, Quinn," she muttered to herself. "Worrying about the future when you don't even have a job for tomorrow. Stupid." The exhaustion was a physical weight pressing down on her eyelids, and before she knew it, she had drifted into a deep, dream-filled sleep. In the dream, she found herself standing in a room awash with the cloying, funeral suite scent of lilies. She walked through the space, disoriented, until her eyes fell upon a large, ornate painting on the wall. It was a beautiful, meticulously detailed landscape, and she felt herself drawn to it, mesmerized. As she stared, a strange sound broke the silence. Thump, thump, thump. It was a dull, rhythmic noise, like a hammer striking a wall. It was coming from behind the painting. Her heart began to pound. With a trembling hand, she reached out to pull the canvas aside. She awoke with a jolt, a scream caught in her throat to the sound of someone pounding furiously on her door. "Hey, hey, in there!" a harsh female voice yelled. "You gonna keep that screaming up all night? Some of us are trying to sleep." Heart hammering against her ribs, Quinn stumbled to the door and opened it. A woman with a furious expression and her hair in rollers stood there, clad in a faded pink bathrobe. She was a minor, one-off character. "You new here?" the woman snapped, her eyes narrowing. "Well, here's a lesson in how things work. You want to live here in peace? You respect other people. No more screaming fits, got it?" Without waiting for an answer, she shot Quinn one last venomous glare and stomped back to her own room, slamming the door behind her. Quinn closed her door, her body trembling slightly. She glanced at her cheap wristwatch. It was just past 6 in the evening. She had slept for over 4 hours. A sudden pang of hunger reminded her she hadn't eaten since morning. She dug a packet of instant ramen out of her backpack, boiled some water in the small kettle provided, and ate the salty noodles while standing over the sink. After a quick shower, she decided to walk outside, to familiarize herself with the area and buy a few necessities. To get to the main road from her alley, she had to pass a small derelict plot of land next to one of the houses. It was choked with weeds and tangled vines, and in the deepening twilight she could just make out the dark shapes of 2 or 3 crooked, forgotten tombstones. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down her spine. She quickened her pace, forcing her eyes forward, pretending she hadn't seen them. The main road was a jarring contrast. Even as night fell, it was alive with the hum of traffic and the murmur of conversation from people gathered outside pubs and diners. It was a chaotic symphony, so different from the dead silence of her boarding house. After a few moments of taking it all in, she remembered her errand and began walking, melting into the stream of pedestrians. A short distance later, she spotted a small, brightly lit convenience store and hurried inside. A man in a baseball cap was sitting at a small table, nursing a cup of coffee. He noticed her hovering uncertainly by the door. "You looking for someone, miss, or just shopping?" he asked, his voice friendly. Startled, Quinn mumbled, just shopping." After she had gathered her items and paid, just as she was about to leave, the man in the baseball cap spoke again. "Say, you're not from around here, are you? I can tell by your accent." Quinn, a naturally honest person, nodded politely. "No, sir. I've just moved here from the south. I'm looking for work." The man's face lit up. "Is that so? Well, isn't that something?" he said, standing. "Look, I don't want to presume, but I own a flower shop, Heavenly Petals. We're actually looking for some help right now. If you're interested, you could stop by tomorrow morning, just to see the place. No pressure." A flicker of hope ignited in Quinn's chest, warring with a natural caution. Was this man a predator? A scam artist? Sensing her hesitation, she asked, "But I don't know the first thing about flowers." "Don't you worry about that," he said smoothly. "We'll teach you everything you need to know. The work isn't hard. Honestly, we just need someone with a friendly face to help with customers." He paused, reaching into his wallet. "Oh, I almost forgot." He pulled out a business card. "Here's the address. The name's Roberts."
Before Quinn could formulate another question, he put his cap back on. "Well, I've got to run. Hope to see you tomorrow." And with that, he was gone. Quinn stared down at the card in her hand. Heavenly Petals Flora, 136 Westmoreland Drive. She tucked it safely into her pocket and began to walk back.
As she turned into the alley, the familiar cold seemed to settle deeper into her bones. The lively sounds of the main road faded into an oppressive silence. The path ahead was empty, illuminated only by a single, flickering tungsten bulb near her boarding house, its weak yellow light barely reaching her.
Suddenly, a sharp rustling sound erupted from the overgrown thicket to her right, the abandoned lot with the graves. She froze. A second later, a large white goose burst from the bushes, squawking loudly as it waddled across her path. The sudden shock made her cry out, a small yelp of terror. She pressed a hand to her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Oh my God," she whispered, "it's just a goose." But then another sound reached her ears, a low, guttural moan. Before she could process it, the shape of an old man emerged from the darkness. He was bent over, supporting himself with a gnarled cane. As he stepped into the weak light, his features resolved into a nightmare. His skin looked like cracked parchment, stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were milky white, utterly blank. Quinn's body went rigid with a terror so profound it felt like ice water flooding her veins. The ghostly figure took a step closer. It let out a high-pitched, cackling laugh that sounded like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Quinn squeezed her eyes shut. Then, a voice echoed in the silence, deep and hollow, seeming to come from the very earth beneath her feet. "Where is my family?" it rasped. "Where is my home?" The terrifying sound shattered her paralysis. With a surge of pure adrenaline, Quinn turned and ran, not daring to look back, the ghost's haunting laughter chasing her all the way to the boarding house's small, desolate yard. She didn't go inside right away. She couldn't.
She collapsed onto a cold stone bench, her body racked with tremors. Her mind reeled. It wasn't real. It couldn't have been. It was the stress, the exhaustion, the strange town, a trick of the light. It had to be.
Rough night? A voice drawled from the shadows. Quinn looked up, startled, to see an older woman sitting on the porch of the main house, wrapped in a thick cardigan. It was Mrs. Gable, from one of the other rooms. You look like you just saw a ghost. Quinn couldn't speak, just shook her head, trying to deny it. The older woman took a long drag from her cigarette, the cherry glowing in the dark. She exhaled a plume of smoke. Don't worry, honey. You get used to it, or you learn to take the long way around.
What are you talking about? Quinn finally managed to ask, her voice a reedy whisper. That patch of dirt, the woman said, gesturing with her cigarette towards the alley. That's the old Abernathy plot. Family used to own most of this land. He died here, old man Abernathy, years ago. Family sold the land, moved away, and left his grave to be swallowed by the weeds. They say he still wanders that path sometimes, looking for the house that isn't there anymore. She took another drag. He won't hurt you. He's just lost. But it's enough to make your heart stop, seeing him for the first time. She stubbed out her cigarette on the railing. My advice? If you're walking home after dark, buy yourself a pack of matches. Light one as you pass. Some say the light keeps him at bay. She looked at Quinn's pale, terrified face and gave a sad, humorless smile. Welcome to Havenwood, kid.
The next morning, Quinn didn't go straight to the flower shop. Her mind was still reeling from the events of the previous night, Mrs. Gable's grim words echoing in her ears. Instead of dismissing it, she decided to heed the old woman's advice. In her own way, she walked to the small market and bought a modest bouquet of wildflowers, their colors a stark contrast to the gray morning. With her heart pounding, she walked back down the dreaded alley, stopping just before the overgrown plot. She didn't dare step inside, but she gently placed the flowers on the ground by the fence, as close to the most prominent tombstone as she could get. She whispered a few quiet words of peace, a simple plea for the wandering soul to rest, then turned and walked away quickly, the feeling of unseen eyes on her back.
She found Heavenly Petals Flora with little trouble. It was, as promised, just a few blocks away from her boarding house, past a major intersection. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. The interior was a riot of color and life. Buckets of fresh-cut roses and lilies lined the floor, their scent thick and sweet. On the ceiling, hanging baskets of orchids and ferns created a lush canopy. It was beautiful, a world away from the decay and gloom of the alley.
A young woman about her age, her hair tied back in a practical ponytail, was busy polishing a glass vase. She looked up as Quinn entered. "Hi, can I help you?" Before Quinn could explain, Mr. Roberts emerged from a back room, a welcoming, perhaps too welcoming, smile on his face. "Ah, there you are. I was hoping you'd come." He introduced the other girl as Ivy. He then turned his full attention to Quinn.
"So," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "what do you think? It's a nice place, isn't it? If you're willing to work here, the pay is $15 an hour. I'll cover your lunch, and you get 2 days off a month. How does that sound? If you agree, you can start tomorrow. Ivy here will show you the ropes." Quinn's mind did a quick, hopeful calculation. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than enough. She could send $400 home every 2 weeks and still have enough to live on. The memory of her father's weary face flashed in her mind. This was her chance. The unease she felt about the man was buried beneath a wave of desperate relief. "Yes," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. "Yes, I'll take it." "Excellent," Mr. Roberts beamed. "Don't call me Mr. Roberts, by the way. Just call me Robert. I'm not that old yet." He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite reach his eyes.
The next day, Quinn began her new life. She was a fast learner, intelligent and eager to please. Under Ivy's efficient tutelage, she quickly memorized the prices, learned how to trim stems without getting pricked by thorns, and mastered the art of tying the perfect bow on a bouquet. She and Ivy worked well together, falling into a comfortable professional rhythm. For a few days, things felt normal, hopeful even. That evening, as they were closing up, Ivy asked Quinn to move a heavy box of fertilizer into the back storeroom. After she was done and was walking back through the main shop, she passed a closed door near the main counter. It was the one room she hadn't been in, a room Mr. Roberts simply called his private office. Suddenly, she heard a sound from within. At first, she thought it was a moth fluttering against a window pane.
But as she listened closer, the sound resolved itself into something chillingly human. The soft, muffled sound of a woman crying. It was a sound of deep, inconsolable sorrow. Quinn stood frozen, her blood running cold. Mr. Roberts had left at 7 p.m. The shop was empty except for her and Ivy. So who was in there? The crying continued, a steady, heartbreaking lament. Should she knock? Should she call out?
Boo! A hand clamped down on her shoulder, and Quinn cried out, spinning around with a gasp. Ivy stood there, a smirk on her face that quickly faded when she saw the sheer terror in Quinn's eyes. "Whoa, what's wrong with you?" Ivy asked, her voice losing its playful edge. "You're white as a sheet. Are you sick?" Quinn shook her head, trying to calm her frantic heartbeat. No, I'm not sick. I thought I heard something." She gestured to the locked door. "In there. It sounded like someone was crying." Ivy rolled her eyes, her skepticism immediate. "Crying? Quinn, there's no one in there. Robert locks it up tight when he leaves. You're probably just hearing the pipes or the wind. This is an old building. It makes weird noises." Before Quinn could argue, Ivy turned and headed for the front door. "Come on, let's get out of here. You're just tired." After carefully locking the front of the shop, Quinn got on the back of Ivy's scooter and they sped off into the night, leaving the dark, silent flower shop behind them.
Another week passed. The work was demanding, especially as the weekend approached and orders piled up. One evening, after a particularly frantic day, they were finally cleaning up, well past 11 p.m. Both girls were exhausted, moving like zombies.
When they finally finished, Ivy pushed her scooter out to the street and let out a groan of frustration. "You have got to be kidding me." The back tire was completely flat. She checked her watch. "Everything's closed. We're stranded." They debated their options. A taxi would be expensive, and neither of them wanted to walk home in the dark. "We could just sleep here," Ivy suggested, sighing. "There are some old blankets in the storeroom. It's just for one night." Reluctantly, Quinn agreed. There was no other choice. After locking the doors and turning off the lights, Quinn decided to take a quick shower in the small employee bathroom to wash away the day's grime. As she was drying her hair, she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and right outside the thin bathroom door. Her heart instantly seized in her chest. "Ivy," she called out, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" Only silence answered her. The footsteps stopped. "I must have imagined it," she told herself, her mind racing. "It's just Ivy moving around." She quickly threw on her clothes, her hands fumbling with the buttons. Taking a deep breath, she slowly pulled the door open and peeked out. The hallway was empty. The only light was a dim glow from the streetlights filtering through the front windows.
She found Ivy in the main shop area, already curled up under a dusty blanket on a pile of empty burlap sacks. "Did you just walk by the bathroom?" Quinn asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ivy looked up, annoyed. "No, I've been right here. Why?" I heard footsteps," Quinn whispered. Ivy sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. "Quinn, stop it. You're freaking yourself out. I told you this place makes noise. Now get some sleep. We have to be up early to get the tire fixed." Dismissed again, Quinn had no choice but to lie down on her own makeshift bed. But sleep felt a million miles away. She lay there in the dark, surrounded by the overwhelming, cloying scent of flowers, listening to every creak and groan of the old building, her eyes wide open in the oppressive darkness. Eventually, sheer exhaustion claimed her, and she fell into a heavy, troubled sleep.
And then she was somewhere else. She was standing in a room she'd never seen before, a silent, invisible observer. It was night. Rain lashed against a window, and thunder rumbled in the distance. A woman, a pregnant woman, was on the floor, sobbing. "Please," the woman begged, a hulking, shadowy figure of a man who stood over her. "Please, I won't tell anyone. Just let me keep our baby. I'll do anything. Please, don't do this."
The man didn't speak. His response was a guttural roar of fury. "You won't listen, will you?" he snarled, his voice a monstrous distortion of a human sound. "I told you to get rid of it." Quinn wanted to scream, to run, to help, but her feet were lead. She was frozen in place, forced to watch the horror unfold. He kicked her hard. Quinn flinched, a sob catching in her own throat. The man didn't stop. He was a whirlwind of savage violence, his blows punctuated by the woman's weakening cries and the relentless drumming of the rain outside. Blood, dark and viscous, began to pool on the floorboards beneath the woman. Her pleas faded to weak whimpers, then to a final, rattling gasp for air. And then she was still. Her hand was pressed against her stomach, a final, futile gesture to protect the life within her. The man stood over her, breathing heavily. He stared down at the body, and for a moment a flicker of something, panic, regret, crossed his shadowed form. No, this isn't my fault," he stammered, backing away. "You made me do this. You forced me." His frantic eyes scanned the room, and then they stopped, locking onto a recessed alcove in the wall. A horrifying, new idea began to form in the darkness of his mind. He would hide her. He would bury her right there in the wall. He moved toward the body. "Quinn! Hey, Quinn! Wake up!" Quinn's eyes flew open. She was back in the flower shop. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. Ivy was kneeling over her, shaking her shoulder. "What's wrong with you?" Ivy asked. "You were screaming in your sleep, and look at the clock. It's almost 7. We need to go." Quinn sat up, drenched in a cold sweat. Her heart was beating like a drum. She looked around the bright, peaceful shop, the scent of fresh flowers once again filling the air. Was it just a dream? It had felt so real, so terrifyingly real. Shaking her head, trying to clear the horrific images, she slowly got to her feet, the nightmare clinging to her like a shroud.
The next day at the shop was thick with an unspoken tension. Quinn couldn't shake the vivid horror of her nightmare. Every shadow seemed to hold a flicker of movement. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of ice through her veins. She found herself glancing constantly at the locked door to Robert's office, the memory of the phantom crying and the brutal vision inextricably linked to it. She said nothing to Ivy, who seemed to have already forgotten the incident, humming a cheerful tune as she arranged a vase of carnations.
As Quinn was bundling a dozen white roses, a sudden, sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, so intense it stole her breath. It was a phantom, sympathetic pain that mirrored the agony of the woman in her dream. She dropped the roses and pressed her hands to her stomach, leaning against the counter for support. "Hey, you okay?" Ivy asked, rushing over, her cheerfulness vanishing. My stomach," Quinn gasped. "I need to go to the back for a minute." She stumbled away, heading towards the employee bathroom. As she passed Robert's office, she stopped dead. The door, which was always meticulously locked, was now slightly ajar.
A wave of dread and morbid curiosity washed over her. She pushed the door fully open and peered inside. It was just an office, a heavy desk, filing cabinets, a few chairs for clients. Nothing seemed out of place. Confused, she backed out and went to the bathroom. When she returned a few minutes later, she glanced at the office again, and her heart stopped. The door was now shut tight, the heavy brass lock gleaming in place.
"Ivy," Quinn said, her voice shaking. "Did Robert come in?" Ivy looked up from her work, confused. "Robert? No, he's out making a delivery. Hasn't been here for an hour. Why?" The office door," Quinn stammered. "It was open. Now it's locked again." Ivy stared at her, her expression shifting from confusion to genuine concern. "Quinn, what are you talking about? That door has been locked all day." Both women screamed. They watched in horror as the heavy padlock on the door shuttered violently, then snapped open, falling to the floor with a loud clang. The door swung inward on its own, slowly, creakily, revealing the oppressive darkness within. Ivy was pale, her skepticism finally shattered. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That was not the pipes." A strange resolve, cold and clear, settled over Quinn. It wasn't her own. It was a borrowed courage, a desperate will pushing her forward. "We need to go in there," she said. "Are you insane?" Ivy hissed. "Something is wrong, Ivy. Terribly wrong," Quinn insisted, her voice eerily calm. "Get me a hammer from the toolbox in the storeroom. Now." Seeing the unnerving certainty in Quinn's eyes, Ivy, terrified but trusting, nodded and ran to the back. Armed with the heavy hammer, they stepped into the office. The air was thick and stagnant, and beneath the scent of old paper, there was another smell, faint but unmistakable, the sweet, sickly smell of decay. Quinn's eyes were drawn to the far wall, the same wall from her dream. There was a long, jagged crack running down the plaster, and from it, a dark reddish-brown liquid was slowly seeping out, like the wall itself was bleeding. The voice from the dream whispered in her mind, clearer than ever, "Let me out." "I know what I have to do," Quinn said, hefting the hammer. "Quinn, no, if you're wrong, we'll have to pay for this," Ivy pleaded. "I'm not wrong." With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Quinn swung the hammer. The plaster shattered, falling away in chunks. She swung again and again, driven by the silent, desperate screams in her head. The hole grew larger, and the foul smell intensified, billowing out into the room. Ivy was retching in the corner, her hand over her mouth. Then a piece of drywall came away, revealing the cavity within. And what was inside?
It wasn't just a cavity. It was a tomb. And inside was the source of the smell. A human body, wrapped in a stained canvas sack, folded into an unnatural position. A skeletal hand had broken free from its wrapping and was sticking out from the crumbling plaster, its bony fingers seeming to reach for them. Ivy's retching turned into a full-blown scream of pure horror. Quinn dropped the hammer, stumbling back. She fumbled for the shop's landline, but the line was dead. She pulled out her cell phone. No signal. The old building's thick walls were blocking it. "We have to get out of here," Ivy shrieked, grabbing Quinn's arm. "We have to run." They scrambled for the front door, but just as they reached it, they heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. The door swung open, and there stood Mr. Roberts, holding a large bag of cement powder, his face arranged in its usual pleasant smile.
His smile faltered as he saw their terrified faces. Then his eyes drifted past them to the destroyed wall of his office. The friendly mask melted away, replaced by a look of cold, terrifying fury. "Well," he said, his voice dropping to a low snarl as he stepped inside and slammed the door shut, locking it from the inside. "It seems you two have been redecorating.
Now I have to fix it and find a bigger space in the wall for 2 more. Panic gave Ivy a surge of courage. She screamed and lunged for the door, but he was faster. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back and throwing her to the floor, where she hit her head and lay stunned. Quinn, acting on pure instinct, grabbed a heavy ceramic vase and hurled it at him. It struck him in the shoulder, shattering on the floor. He roared in pain and rage, turning his murderous attention to her.
He lunged, grabbing her and slamming her back against a table. The world exploded in a flash of pain. He picked up a large, sharp shard of the broken vase. "You just had to be nosy, didn't you?" he hissed, his face inches from hers. He raised the shard, its jagged edge aimed at her throat. Quinn shut her eyes, a single tear escaping. This was it. The weight on top of her vanished. Quinn opened her eyes. Mr. Roberts was collapsing to the floor. Behind him stood Ivy, holding a thick piece of wooden shelving, her face a mask of terror and determination. She had recovered just in time. He lay on the ground, unconscious. Gasping and sobbing, the 2 girls unlocked the door and ran screaming into the street. Minutes later, the night was filled with the wail of police sirens. The police found the body in the wall just as the girls had said. On the victim's forehead, drawn in what looked like dried blood, was a strange, complex symbol, a desperate, evil attempt to silence a vengeful spirit. In his confession, Mr. Roberts told them everything. The victim was a former employee, a girl he'd been having an affair with. When she became pregnant and refused to have an abortion, he flew into a rage and killed her in that very office. He had planned to move the body, but fear paralyzed him, so he'd sealed her in the wall, hoping she would never be found. But he didn't count on her spirit. He didn't count on her pain being so strong it would leak through the walls, through dreams, and into the heart of a stranger. He didn't count on the fact that a mother, even in death, would do anything to be found, and to seek justice for the child she never got to hold.